dragon claw, wing and scale. Come now, let's examine a tale of the greatest beast ever considered. Another episode of Big Flying Lizards.
So I was thinking to start off this first episode. I'm going to do something, we're recording now, that I meant to do in our session 0 housekeeping, table setting episode and run down all of the amazing names that we came up with for this show but did not end up using.
Let's hear them.
So obviously, Big Flying Lizards. The best option. I'm very happy with it. I think it's a great name. I think there's a lot we can do with it.
S tier.
The best.
Yeah.
But very close to being the name of this podcast, Studio Apartment of the Dragon.
Shows homage to our show that we're going to be talking about
exactly.
today.
And I think it really just came down to we didn't want to align ourselves too hard with House of the Dragon.
Yeah.
But for those watching on YouTube, accurate, huh?
Look at all this space for activities.
Anyway, yeah, we also considered Duplex of the Dragon, neither of which would have been totally accurate, but I think would have conveyed the spirit of what we're going for with this show.
Duplex of the Dragon flew off the tongue pretty well.
Yeah, I like alliteration. That's the one thing that I wish we could have gotten into ours, but it is what it is.
S tier.
Also very close, Scales, Nails, and Dragon Tales. But the issue there is a concern that would align us with another show, which may be discussed one day, but
I'm going to put it that as will be discussed one day, not any of this maybe shit.
Episode by episode.
We're going to break it down.
Okay. You heard it here. I've made no such commitment. Maybe that's in the second iteration of this podcast. We also had Fire and Film, another Game of Thrones reference there. Wyvern Warnings, Filmic Fire Breathers, the Fire Breather Filmography, Chasing the Dragon Film Edition, The Dragon Canon. That one feels like it should rhyme more than it actually does, but anyway.
No, I agree.
Scales on Screen. And last, but probably the second closest to actually being the name of this podcast was Through the Fire and Frames.
That one, that just does have such a special place in my heart. It's just so intense, though. It's not that jovial atmosphere that we're going to be bringing into this situation.
Precisely.
Well, welcome to the Big Flying Lizards Dragon Movie Podcast.
That's the one we went with.
That's us. I am Bryce Wilson. I am joined by my very dear and good friend, Austin Snyder, who gave us the whole rundown. Austin, what are we going to be doing today?
Today is the first episode proper.
First episode.
Which is a big deal. And I'm going to try and get an on-running bit here and label every episode that we do as a first something for as long as I can sustain that. But this is a big first. We're actually covering some media today. We're talking about Season 1, Episode 1 of HBO's House of the Dragon.
Yes. I know it's been said. I know this is not a new take, but this first episode was honest. Like it, as far as pilots go, it might be one of the best pilots for a TV show that's out there.
It's fucking great. But before that, let's just reiterate really quick where we're coming from getting into this.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we're just two guys that have a passion for film as well as the fantasy, specifically Big Flying Lizards. And we really feel like that with our both passion, one with more of a passion for the fantasy, the other for more of the passion in the film, we can really just dive in and break down what we see, what we can highlight, and what makes these films, shows great.
Yes. We also are coming at this late. So this is kind of a rewatch, like a catch-up series.
Correct.
I want that to be clear off the bat, that we have seen House of the Dragon, and we are going through the first season we've seen the first season. The second season has not currently aired. We are catching up through the first season so that we can follow along with the second season as it premieres.
And we will, there'll be things that we'll be discussing that will be foreshadowing stuff later in the later episodes of the season. However, we will be doing it episode by episode basis. We'll really refrain from trying to mention like, well, we know in episode 6, like.
Yeah. And I like, while I think that's our general approach, that like, if you're listening to this, you've seen the episode we're talking about, but we will do our best to not spoil what is to come.
I do think it's fair to say that this show is a spoiler show.
Okay, so get this. So right here, I've made us like a little cheat sheet of all of the primary characters and the actors they're portrayed by. I'm very proud of it, even though it is in grayscale. But as I was making this, I went to HBO's website because they have like a character family tree.
Yeah.
That's just like listed as like get to know the characters. And when I clicked on it, it had every character who has died so far in the show labeled as deceased. And I'm like, oh, well, that's just like a little death trap that they got hanging out on their site.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, like no one, it's fine. I've seen the show, and I'm not as sensitive to spoilers as some, but I feel like that's sort of baked into these shows, as they want people watching week to week to avoid the spoilers. And for that, they're almost encouraging spoilers post-premiere.
Well, I don't know if you remember this, Austin. When this episode got released, it was like a cultural phenomenon. Like,
I don't remember because I wasn't there.
I know you weren't there, but online, like there's a video of a building in New York where you can literally see the entire building like lighting up with the same colors because everybody in the building was watching the show at the same time.
Amazing.
And I think that just, I mean, because HBO assumes that people are going to be watching it right when it drops rather than 6 months from today, people are going to be keeping up with it and know what's going to be going on. And really, any of these things shouldn't be spoiled unless you watch the show 6 months from today.
Well, you know what? I get to it when I get to it. And I do want to float out not a flaming hot take, but I think a warm take.
Warm take
that I had after my first watch of the season, in that I feel like season 1 of House of the Dragon is better than any individual season of Game of Thrones. This is something I'm going to check back in on after this rewatch, because I've seen Game of Thrones through twice. And as of this recording, I've only seen through House of the Dragon season 1 once, but it's really solid.
It's solid, but at the same time, like, there's season 3 of Game of Thrones. Season 4 is amazing as well.
I think season 2 and season 3 of Game of Thrones are the only real competition it has. And as of right now, I feel pretty good about this take. But again, I will check in on our season 1 episode 10 episode.
Well, going off of that statement, just because of how much Game of Thrones wrapped up disappointed me as a viewer, I have to say, going into watching House of the Dragon, like, obviously I was going to watch it, but I was very much had my reservations about it. I was not excited about watching it. I was really excited about watching the masterpiece Rings of Power. Now,
yeah,
with the shows,
which had some airing overlap,
yes,
as I recall.
It had very much some airing overlap, and they were coming up to the same time. And I was so excited for Rings of Power and House of the Dragon. I was like, I'll watch it, but I'm not getting my hopes up. Boy, if not by episode 3 on each episode, it was completely flipped. I mean, it might have been even episode 2 with Rings of Power, how that just had changed up for me.
I still have some hope that they can turn things around with that show. But I just got to say, that shit with the Balrog,
yes,
that literally the tease that they showed in the trailer ended up being the entirety of that element in the show. maybe the biggest ripoff in television history, at least from my experience. You're the expert on that.
I would definitely say that is the biggest. Like, it literally felt like they just took that out of a Fellowship of the Ring, and it didn't even feel like it was their own. Like, I'm pretty sure the same movements that it did was in the Fellowship.
They just took the same CGI model. It could have been just a little extra animation.
But before we get off to this becomes the Rings of Power episode, I feel like we should really dive in and talk about episode 1 of House of the Dragon.
All right, we'll focus.
So, I will just start off by saying when the show opens up, it gives the background of House Targaryen. They had been in power for
no title sequence. On the first episode.
And you know what? I think that's something I want to start off with, because Game of Thrones' title sequence was so iconic. And I know, and I'll save the part of this for the next episode because we'll get into the actual title sequence that they're incorporating. I actually loved how simple it was, where it just showed the Targaryen symbol. There was some music. It was not that long. I thought that it was actually a really good, like, I don't get me wrong, I'm a sucker for long title sequences. I mean, we're watching
title sequences or prologues.
Title sequences.
Okay, yeah.
Like Sopranos, classic. Succession, classic. Like, animes are determined on.
I actually think I'm sort of the opposite. Well, let's save that discussion until we actually get it in 2. But I think it was wise to just drop us straight in for this first episode.
Well, they did, but they didn't, because they did bring up the Targaryen symbol, and there was some music, and that was technically how I viewed it. The title sequence. That was what was going to be the that was that episode's opening. Obviously, the whole prologue talking about the council in Harrenhal, which Harrenhal looked like, that was the first thing that struck me, was how incredible Harrenhal looked. Like, I don't know if that was really to
Solid.
you, but I know I'm going to be saying a lot of positive things about this episode, but like, the set design for this show is just, you can't beat it. Like,
it's solid. It's really good. Like, the money on screen, and I'm sure that's not the first time I'm going to say that in this episode and in this series. Like, it's one of those shows. I actually have the figure that the budget for the first season was $200 million, which is like a lot. But it's also one of those that you look at and you're like, I kind of get it. And it's money that's going to actual sets and actual costumes in a lot of cases. Where I mean, there's a fair bit of CGI.
Oh, of course,
but
the dragons aren't real.
No.
Fuck.
See, that's the big bubble.
I was gonna see how much you could get that for.
You still wanna do the podcast?
What? They're not real.
The point that Bryce is actually trying to make is that they look really good. But we'll be breaking down the dragons more later.
Yeah.
This first set, really great. I like it. The costuming. And as far as just like the approach with it, I think that they sort of nailed it, in that I'm sure there was a temptation to do this like extended, like Fellowship of the Ring style prologue.
Oh yeah.
With like a bunch of like really laying out the history of House Targaryen, and they're just more like, no, we're gonna get a little narration from the older Rhaenyra.
Yeah.
And this one pivotal scene, and then the time jump, and we're in the show prop.
And I feel like it also did a great job at breaking down how there's already that tension within the family. You have the tension between Viserys, and you have the tension between Rhaenyra. Sorry. Just, you can feel.
Wait, no. You're right, because it's Rhaenyra is Viserys' daughter, but you're referring to Rhaenys, yes. You can feel like the tension's already there. You're already like, she was snubbed the throne because she's a woman. She's the oldest Targaryen child that has ties to the throne, but instead it was given to the eldest male son who had ties to the throne. And you can already feel that there's that tension boiling, and especially how the episode progresses, we can really see why that tension is almost justified.
but I also do like that it did give, at least it did establish, and where you said they could have gone in and been like, Aegon the First came in and then he had a son and he begot whole almost Bible tokens.
Yeah.
But I also like, I feel like selfishly they also really want to do some spin-off shows to the spin-off shows.
Right. It's like how because they have the guy playing Bilbo in Fellowship, but then they cast Martin Freeman later.
Yes.
Like they just want to avoid any miscontinuity there.
Exactly. Like I feel like they do, like they could, if they didn't have the intention, we most likely would have gotten that. But because there's this huge pull to Game of Thrones, I mean, I personally really want an Aegon's Conquest, which is the first king of Westeros. I feel like it'd be amazing to see that. There's some other kings in the line that would be really good. But
for the sake of this show, yeah, keep them coming.
Keep
let's
us
go
in business. But is there anything else that we want to cover just with the prologue? Like I
don't think so. Whatever reason, I think for them doing it, I think it works. I think it's just right. It's a nice little stinger at the front there to sort of set the tone, really underline like the core conflict of what's happening in this episode and like the greater show.
Yeah.
And then we're into it. And then it's to the Rhaenyra flying through the clouds over King's Landing. Am I jumping too far ahead?
At 3 minutes and 35 seconds into the show, we get our first dragon scene. That is what we get. At the 3 minute and 35 second mark, we get Syrax.
One of those. Syrax is what I thought.
Syrax, Rhaenyra's dragon, the gold dragon. We're going to do a deep dive at the end of the episode talking about the dragons in particular, but I really got the sense that Syrax is a young dragon. Like I feel like they really did a good job at portraying that.
You think?
Again, when we get into it later, and especially when we're talking about the other dragon that we saw in the show, I'll break down why I think they did a good job showing like the emotional maturity as well as just the effects that they did with it. But we do get the scene with Rhaenyra flying through the air with the dragon. I don't know if you got this sense, but I got the feeling when I was seeing it that it could have very much been a symbolization that she's free. Like she has very much the free will to do what she wants. She's going where she wants. She doesn't really listen. Like she even gives Sir Westerling, I forgot what his first name is, Harold.
Harold? Yep.
Sir Harold Westerling. Like she was even giving him a little bit of shit when he came back down and landed. Like,
yeah, and I mean, like the follow-up scene, she's talking to her pregnant mother.
Yeah.
And her mom's like, the queen is like, you're gonna have to make some babies soon, and she kind of blows her off. Like that's not really a care for her at this point.
Yeah. And we'll go into this detail a little bit earlier, but she makes the line that is in a Game of Thrones, but is reiterated in this, that a woman's battlefield is in the pregnancy room, or I don't
the labor room.
The labor room. I don't remember the exact terminology. I probably should have written it down, but like essentially that the birthing bed or something along those lines. But I feel like there's a lot of ties there. But again, we're just seeing that Rhaenyra has that free spirit. She doesn't want to follow the norms, and she wants to be able to be her own woman and follow her own path, which
you go, girl.
She does what she wants. She does what she wants.
Yep. So she dismounts. She meets Harold Westerling.
Yes.
Not meets, but is greeted by, and also her bestie, Lady Alicent Hightower.
The BFF.
Absolutely.
And even just right off the bat, you can tell that Alicent is very much like Rhaenyra's the free-spirited one. Alicent is the rule follower.
She's more conservative.
She's
in that sense.
She is definitely the more conservative of the two. I don't want to say tells her off, because that clearly is not what she's doing, but she's very mildly telling Rhaenyra that she needs to like hone it in a little bit.
Well, jumping ahead a little bit, there's the scene of them studying together, and she's like, Rhaenyra is sort of like blowing her off, like, oh, this isn't important. She tears the page out of the book, and she's shook, like, oh, if the scepter,
my God,
yeah, they're just being really smart, and this actually leads into the next scene I want to talk about. But they're setting up the character dynamics, really smartly, and that's no more obvious than in the small council scenes.
I love the small council scenes. Each one, obviously a new issue is being brought up in each and individual one, but you can just see the dynamic of how, like, well, just like you said, like what each character is really bringing. Like everybody in the small council are just yes men for King Viserys. Otto is Well, even Otto, like, yes, Otto is definitely trying to play puppet master, but at the end of the day, he's still going along with what the king is. But personally, from what I see, he has about it where he's like, I can get what I want out of this man, but I'll follow what he says, but eventually make him think the way I think.
Yeah, and that's what's revealed throughout, because we have 3 small council scenes in the first episode.
Was it 3 or was there 4?
It could have been 4.
I took note of each one. No, there's 4. There's 4 council scenes.
I don't know where I'm at, but
what episode did you watch?
Throughout these episodes, throughout these scenes, I think it really posits that there are, within the small council, 3 men with ambition, and the rest are more satisfied with what's going on. And that's in the very first scene where, is it Corlys?
Corlys, yeah.
I mean, he's bringing up, like, this dude has ambition, and also just Black Targaryen. Can we just talk about that real quick?
I love Corlys. Like, Corlys is one of my favorite characters.
I thought he'd be your favorite.
He's in the top 2. I'd say he's he's in the top 2.
But just like that image, and they were counting on this, because I do feel like it got a rise when the trailer dropped. Just platinum blonde dreads, black dude, Black Targaryen. Holy shit, why did it take us this long to get here?
He looked in, like, and again, there's later episodes when he's in the full getup where I'm like, this guy, I'd pledge your sword. I'd pledge my sword to this man. But
yeah, within the scene though, like, all Viserys wants to talk about is like the upcoming festivities, like he's going to have a baby, like peacetime, and Corlys,
yeah,
I'll get it. He's like talking about the crab eater. Is that her name?
The crab eater, yeah.
Yeah, out there, the trinity that's forming. He's like, we need to take action. We need to stay on top of this. This is a man of ambition.
Yes.
There's also a quick little moment where Rhaenyra is passing around the wine, and he declines it.
Which,
it's subtle, but I think there's a lot there.
If I understand it correctly, the only other time I've seen that happen in the show was at the Red Wedding when Lord Bolton put his hand over
real
the
shit.
cup. I could be wrong. It could be happening more.
It is a show of alcoholics.
It's a show of alcoholics.
Which I mean, you want to live in this world?
That's like one of the few good things that they've got going for them.
Yeah.
But yes, I think that did speak volumes, because it very much showed that he was there for business. And you also get this, like, where he was he's the husband of Rhaenys. So he very much was snubbed being made, I don't know if he would have been named a king, but the equivalent of being second.
Yeah, what do you call it when we get our first female president? He was going to be the first man.
He was going to be the first man.
The first guy. The first fellow.
He's going to be the first brother.
It's going to be the queen's husband.
The queen's husband, yes.
No, I'm sure he would have been the king, but is there like maybe there's like an official term for like not king in power, or
Well,
or in that case, would he have been?
We'll get into it later because there's things that happen in the show.
Okay. I can be patient.
But very much you can tell that he's a man who's been snubbed, and he's very much trying to take as much like even the fact that he was invited to be on the small council, which I think the show does as good of a job as it can, but in the books it makes it being part of the small council is a lot bigger of a deal in my opinion than it is being in the book. It's a lot bigger of a deal than being on the small council in the show is. Like,
I mean, it's a pretty big deal. It's just I think we spend so much time there, we get used to it.
yes, but in the show, there's, especially if you watch a Game of Thrones, there's times where they're like, "Oh, I'm part of the small council." Or like, "Oh,
Sure.
you're being put into spots," and people are like angry about being put into spots. While in the book, people are literally trying to like assassinate people so they could be having people placed onto the small council. So,
Well, that. I mean, that tracks with like Daemon, who doesn't seem particularly content being the city watch. What does that make him?
well, he's the head of the city watch, which is a position in a Game of Thrones to be. Well,
It's on the small council.
hello, guys. Bryce from the future here. I just want to issue a quick correction. I said that the head of the city watch is part of the small council. I was thinking of the head of the King's Guard when I was making that comment. However, I know that does not make sense since Daemon is the head of the City Watch and not the King's Guard. I'm an idiot. Please enjoy the rest of the podcast and ignore my mistake.
But it's like he obvious like he says as much that he wants to be the hand,
Yes.
but he's also like, no, I want to be on the council like somewhere. Like, come on, at least do me that.
Yes. But before we get into that, I do want to also point out something I found really interesting. Daemon is who we first see sitting on the Iron Throne in House of the Dragon.
That there's one shot that's like shallow focus, and it's like kind of like glowing around him as he's sitting on the Iron Throne that is just magnificent.
Well, yes, it is magnificent. But also, the king is not the first person shown sitting on the Iron Throne in a Game of Thrones as well. We never see Robert Baratheon sit on the Iron Throne in a Game of Thrones.
Interesting.
So I'm having a hard time remembering, but I believe Ned Stark is the first person we see sit the Iron Throne in a Game of Thrones. So we get the sense that we get two people that are not the king, the first visual sitting on the Iron Throne.
Huh. I wonder if that's foreshadowing anything.
But that was just something that I found really interesting as just when I was watching that, because I mean, we saw how Sir Westeling reacted when he saw like
Indeed.
like he was like, gods, like what is he doing? He just having an aneurysm over there seeing, and Rhaenyra just like, oh, he's fine, like no offense is taken.
Well, she seems pretty laissez-faire about most things.
Oh, for sure, but she was trying to calm the knight down, the traditional knight, make sure that he's fine and happy because he was about to go and kill.
Regardless, big intro.
Yes.
For Daemon. I liked it. Also, the expanded throne in this series,
Yes.
super cool. I almost wish they could take it to another level, because you see like the sketches, or I haven't read the book, but it's my understanding that the Iron Throne is like gargantuan.
Yes.
And it's just like a mountain of swords.
Well, it is a mountain of swords. It's all the swords that that everybody surrendered to him, and they melted down and made it into the Iron Throne. Like and again, I know it gets brought up several times, but the Iron Throne is not meant to be a comfortable seat. It is meant to be a sign of power. So you're elevated above everybody. You're sitting literally in the weapons of your enemies. And as it's later stated in the show, it's the most dangerous seat in all of Westeros.
It's badass.
It's pretty badass.
So again, going back to that inevitable Aegon series, that's when we're gonna get the full form of the Iron Throne.
I have a feeling it's going to be a big scene.
Okay.
It's going to be big.
But I do think it's kind of a cool look, especially in that one shot that I was referencing to sort of expand it. It adds some grandeur to the scene.
Yes.
I just liked that angle.
I know that is something that George really wanted to expand on, at least, because he talked about how I listened to an interview where he mentioned he wasn't satisfied with how the Iron Throne was.
That feels like a budget thing.
And that's what he did admit as well. But I'm sure that having it have the whole lead up, having the pathway, being elevated on top of that, like I'm sure that he was like, okay, we've got money. Let's make this work.
Yeah, see, he's on set. Step in the right direction. he's right there with me. It sounds like.
By the third or fourth show, it's going to be the actual gargantuan size where you're sitting like above everybody looking down on.
Please.
But on the subject of Daemon, I just think it's really worth pointing out just how the two brothers are very, very different, even in the sense of how they command the rooms that they're in.
And especially in the sense that Paddy Considine and Matt Smith, bit of a stretch to tell me they're full-blood brothers.
Yes, but what I'm more going at is when you see Viserys in that first council meeting, it's literally all just yes men. That you don't get the sense that he's inspiring anybody in that room. They all want to be around him because he's powerful.
I agree. And even where Corellis is kind of making a stink, he's very much in the king's pocket. Like he's in check. He's not making like he's not going to throw a tantrum. He can't.
Yes. You also get the sense that they are all the king's men, but the minute it's not beneficial for them to be the king's men, they will abandon the king. However, on the flip side, when you see Daemon with the whole scene at the beginning with the gold cloaks, you get the sense that they're dedicated to Daemon. Yes, obviously he's their leader, but just how he was able to motivate them, you could tell that they were willing to lay down their lives for Daemon.
They were doing the alpha wolf howls.
They were doing
if you can get a battalion of grown men to do the alpha wolf howl going into battle, you got them. They're yours.
That's what I'm saying. Like Daemon very much like the way that they are able to inspire loyalty. You can just see that difference there.
It's also something that I think it's apparent right from the jump. I think it's apparent from the very first time you see Viserys. Like as soon as it's announced he's going to be king, he doesn't want it. Like he's kind of like, oh, geez, like that look on his face where, I mean, he's like, I will take this great responsibility for it. It is mine. But
yeah,
it's just everything that he does. And even more so as the show goes along, he doesn't want this. Which makes for a good king.
He just wants to be in his room, chiseling away
his little miniatures.
Yes. That's all he wants to do. He just wants his wife to love him, and he wants to be making miniatures.
Okay, but Bryce, let's be real here. How many people in this universe get to be miniature enthusiasts that aren't the king?
Not enough.
That is a hugely wasteful, expensive hobby that we are so blessed to be able to enjoy on the scale that we do in our modern age.
Can a man not just be a little, just tick, 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 just carve away a little bit? That's all he wants to do, like just to let the man live.
Yeah, and I am mostly jesting. I'm sure that a man of his status even not being the king, but perhaps the brother of the king could still engage in such a pursuit.
I would even be willing to say that his hobbies versus his brother's hobbies are healthier.
Healthier. Oh, absolutely. I'm just talking about expense and practicality.
Well, I don't know how many people Daemon's hiring, but like we don't know how expensive.
Everybody wants a Targaryen baby.
You know that Daemon's only going to the nicest of brothels. Like it's not like he's going to be going down for a dime a dozen sort of situation. Like he is spending those golden dragons and he is expecting golden dragon service.
I'm sure. That is a good point though on the way he inspires his men. So there's the scene where they round up all the criminals, they cut off some dicks, they kick ass.
And this is the sense that I was, and again, the sense that I was getting is, yes, Daemon is trying to flex the power that he has, but I wasn't getting the sense that he was just doing that to be an asshole. I genuinely think he was going into it saying, this is an issue for my brother. Like, and it does go into detail again, not to try to compare to a Game of Thrones with a House of a Dragon, but in a Game of Thrones, they talked about when the Hand's Tourney was taking place, crime was skyrocketing because everybody was coming to the capital because of the Hand's Tourney. With the Heirs Tourney happening, I'm sure it was very much the same. I'm sure crime was skyrocketing. I'm sure there was a lot of issues. And
taking advantage of those tourists.
They were taking advantage of those tourists. And Daemon was, and I'm sure, again, it wasn't explained this way, but I'm sure Daemon saw like, okay, I have the city watch. I have this responsibility. Let me show to my brother that I'm capable and able to do something. And he went out and did a service, because I believe I think it was Lionel who said during the small council meeting, like, crime is down now. Like everyone was like, oh, it's horrible. It's horrific. People have bad images. But it worked.
Yeah, but his methods, though.
I feel like they're again, not in the modern era would be acceptable, but back then I feel like that's par for the course of what would go on. Like,
yeah. And I'm already, we get a little more of this in the episode, but I'm already really just into the character of Daemon, in that on the surface, he might feel like the villain. Like the wicked brother who's, in line for the throne. What's he gonna do to get it? He clearly has ambition, but I think throughout the episode, and indeed the greater season, he's revealed to be the most complicated figure in this show.
Complicated, like I feel like complicated is an understatement of how he is, because I mean, even through the first time watching, I kept going back and forth with it. Like, there were times I'm like, man, I hate this guy. Like, he just is so hateable. And I'm like, then there'll be an episode later, like, this, like, I love this guy. Like, he's incredible.
He's a great character.
And we have to give props to Matt Smith, like, for being able to show that and be able to portray, like, again, I'll just get this out of the way. Everybody in the show, I feel like, does an amazing job within the show.
No weak links. And that's in some contrast to another show.
What show, Austin? What show are we
Just
talking
another show that I saw. 8 seasons.
Huh. Hell, doesn't recall.
Had some really strong performances in it as well. Just, a less bulletproof cast in that case, for sure. And that's another one where it's like, okay, the money well spent. We're not just up on the screen, not just in the effects, but like we're making strong choices off the bat with this series.
Yes. I like every single one of the actors and actresses that have screen time. They all made an impression on me that, one, they know what they're doing. 2, they're talented. And 3, like, they understand the world they're in, which, I mean, I feel like that's a big deal. At least, as a fan of a Game of Thrones and the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, I want them to have a general idea of, okay, they're not in a happy world. They're not in a world that it's going to be sunshine and rainbows. They're in a nitty-gritty world. They're in somewhere where dark things happen. dragons are incinerating people.
You're saying it's a perfect breeding ground for these complicated characters.
Exactly.
Which is a challenge for an actor to take on, but for the right actor, a rewarding one.
Yes, where we see Matt Smith be able to really thrive and just show off the Dark Prince.
Which I'm sure that all of these actors are getting very well compensated for this.
Oh, I'm sure.
But you also have to credit the showrunners, the casting directors in rallying people for what is essentially second generation Game of Thrones, where I'm sure that there was a temptation to be like, oh, well, this is going to make money no matter what.
Yes.
But like, okay, we're not shills here. Like, we have not received a dime. If you're watching on YouTube, like, that should be abundantly clear.
Don't ask where this dragon came from, Austin.
Apologies, I'm getting over a cold. But just like they're setting up a really solid series here. They're clearly taking it serious.
Yes.
And I think they're overall going about it smarter and like taking what was learned from the first series, which again has some highlights and was massively popular, but this doesn't feel in any way like them resting on their laurels to me.
I will also point out that I really credit everybody that they are including George as much as they are, because I do feel like that is a lot of the show's success, because it became evident that especially in the later 3 seasons, George was either hardly involved or not involved at all for a Game of Thrones. And I know there was a lot of other issues going on, but I feel like that was one of the big issues, that they didn't have the author who, like, I'm a firm believer that he is the creator of this world. He knows these characters. He's essentially a god figure in this world. He knows how each individually one of them are going about it. He should be able to say, no, this person would never do it, or no, he or she would do this in a different way. Or
I think that is, again, more money well spent to keep him in the family,
yes,
as it were.
Yes. Now, I know it's really having an effect on a certain book that he needs to release, but, I'll be patient.
Hold your ground, dude.
It's coming. I'm still believing.
Don't release it.
Austin, I will drop the address here and I will have an army.
You're going to swat our own podcast?
I will swat our own podcast if I hear this blasphemy brought up.
All right. Well, okay. What about the show? What about the episode?
Also want to go. I know we touched a little bit on the scene with Alicent and Rhaenyra out in the little garden area.
Yeah.
But I think it is just worth reiterating that you get the sense that Rhaenyra is not only a free-willed woman, but she's also quite intelligent. She clearly knows all of the information that Alicent was trying to quiz her on. She just doesn't care. She doesn't find it important. You could argue that she doesn't see the point of her knowing it, because in her mind, she thinks she's just going to be married off to build the family relationship with the Great Lords. She doesn't believe that she's really destined for anything else. So she's blowing off all of that. While Alicent, even though her father might have intentions for her, she doesn't really have any what appears to be goals or ambitions. She's just trying to be the best daughter she can be.
She's sticking to the plan.
She's sticking to the plan, even though she doesn't know what the plan is.
Yeah. That sounds like my childhood. Just nonstop worry.
But I think it is worth just showing, because Rhaenyra could be like, you're going to see characters later on that are free-willed like she is, but don't have the intelligence, or they have the intelligence and they don't have the free will. And I feel like it's a nice little combination, that she's not out there being a menace to society, but at the same time, she's not conforming herself to be the perfect little Targaryen princess.
Yeah. At least not yet.
Not yet. Do we want to talk about the tourney?
Yes. Well, before that, there is a scene with the Grand Maester treating a little back sore on Viserys,
Yes.
and I'm sure that's just like not going to be anything.
No, it's you heard we said they just need to cauterize the wound. It'll be all good.
Yeah. It's the old thing they say, nobody ever coughs in a movie for no reason. You know, it's always lung cancer.
I have some opinions on this, but I want to save it for later episodes as we get more into it, just because
I'm just bringing a little attention.
Oh,
to it.
for sure.
It was just a quick little scene.
It's definitely worth admitting that because he cut himself. That it's from the Iron Throne. Like that's where these.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah, so that's like again in the lore, the throne determines who's a worthy king or not. If you cut yourself on the Iron Throne, it's the equivalent of the throne telling you you're not worthy to be king.
Because there's the scene later where he cuts himself. Is there another, or is that what you're referring to?
Well, the sore on his back came from the Iron Throne. I don't remember if it was Otto or if it was one of the maesters that were just saying the Iron Throne has a high toll or something along those lines, where you know that it's inferring that he cut himself from the Iron Throne because they're all swords, they're all weapons, they're all.
Dude, I love that. That's adding a whole new level to it for me.
Well, and again, not going back to the books, but the Mad King Ares, he was cutting himself all the time. Like
on purpose?
No, like on he was cutting himself all the time on the throne, and that was like when a lot of the people were like, oh, maybe he really is mad. Maybe he's not worthy to sit the throne, because it's again the idea of you need to know how to sit in the throne. You need to know how to present yourself in the throne. But yes, I do think it's worth noting that throne may not like Viserys over here.
The throne has a will of its own then.
It's the most dangerous seat in Westeros.
Yeah. There's also, before we do get to the tourney, there's a
Yes.
quick scene between Viserys and Aemma.
Yes.
Where she tells him that this is the last child she can attempt. She is heavy with child. She has miscarried many times, and it's already been made clear that it is important for them to produce an heir, but she discloses to him that this is our last go at it.
And it also is when Viserys says, I know it's a son. It's not like I hope it's a son, or I'm pretty sure it's going to be a son. I've had a vision. He's going to take the throne. He's going to unite this land. This is going to be the son and as we'll talk about later, he's very much a man of prophecy. He's a man of legacy. He's a man of destiny. Like this is what's most important to him, is carrying on the legacy of House Targaryen and producing the promised son, you might say.
This is the aspect to being king that he is taking most seriously.
Yes. I do also like when did they I do think it also is worth pointing out that why I really think that Daemon was making an effort to be useful rather than just going off on his own and being the rogue prince is he wasn't performing when he went back to the brothel. Like, you could clearly tell something was wrong with him. Some will argue that it's like, oh, he's impotent. Like he can't perform. I really think that he's really trying his best to be the best brother he can. And here, because at the end of the second small council meeting, when they were all talking about how he was horrible for it, he could hear everybody. And I do think that it was really affecting him in the sense that he wants to be that brother that the king can rely on. He wants to be the hand of the king. He wants to be just essentially, not spoiling anything, the shoulder to lean on.
Yeah. I I will keep that in mind as we continue deeper into the season because, again, he's a fascinating character, and I really would like to nail down at least a fleshed out hypothesis as to what makes him tick. And that could be it, but I have a feeling it's a little more complicated than that.
I'm sure it's more complicated, but I also do think it's worth noting that him being in the whorehouse trying to perform and not able to perform happens right after that small council meeting where everybody was just taking a shit on him.
That's true.
It's also worth noting that the only person who wasn't taking a shit on him was Corlys in the small council meeting.
Interesting.
And I also do think this second small...
Well, Viserys as well.
Well...
Or am I mixing my scenes?
He wasn't being as like... Corlys was essentially saying, like, he has every right to do this.
Oh, okay.
King Viserys was just, like, listening and not being supportive, but he also wasn't, like...
The extent of Viserys' support seems to be more like, he's my brother, and I trust him.
He gets a pass.
Yeah, he hits him with the, come on.
He's got the hair.
He does. He sure does.
I do also feel like it's worth noting in this meeting in particular, I think you really see Otto Hightower really flexing that he is the most powerful person at the table. Like he was commanding everybody. He was trying to lay down the law. And even though I love the actor, love what he's doing, I hate Otto. Like I hate him. And I loved just seeing how Daemon was essentially spitting in his face and not listening to him. And that was something that I just was loving the entire time. And I'm sure it won't have any repercussions later on within the show.
Can we talk about the tournament now?
I just want to get this out of the way. I don't know how much you noticed. I loved the armor. Like everybody's armor was incredible.
So, and there's one in particular that I'm sure is tops for both of us because Daemon's armor with the gold cloaks, like the gold that he had earlier, super badass, noteworthy even. But his like Black Knight getup for the tournament, holy shit,
it was incredible. But I'm as incredible as Daemon's was. I loved Otto's son's armor. I don't know if you remember it, but it had like the tower on his helmet. His entire getup was like decked out and like it looked amazing. Cause like Daemon came in and got to pick who he got to joust against. And he wanted to, again, spit in the face of Otto. So he picked the son, and he was like the helmet just looked incredible. It had the little horn, but it was a high tower, and then everything else about it. Like they did such an amazing job.
The costuming in this show, top tier.
Yes.
Which for some reason means a lot these days because like Marvel really slipping on their costume game these days. Another show, we've already said it. The Rings of Power costumes kind of shit.
Yeah.
Like definitely a weak point. And there are strong points to that show. The costumes were not one of them.
Yes. And I just love that it appeared to be they were willing to spend money on it. I'm excited to see how they're going to continue to spend money on this set. However, I did like the memes that were coming out. Like everybody was saying, oh yeah, Robert Baratheon was really bankrupting the capital. Look at
compared to the festivity. Yeah. Well, this does seem to be a greater era of prosperity than we're dropped into with the original series.
In reality, it would have been a Robert.
It's and a budget thing.
It is a budget, but Robert, like that was the big thing about Robert in A Game of Thrones. He spent all the money, including the money they didn't have. So if it really was, we would have been blown away with what the hands tourney would have looked like. But it's still fun. I still love just seeing the memes. They're like, oh yeah, Robert really was broke over here.
But the portrayal of the jousting, the dueling.
Yes.
Excellent. And so did you watch the little featurette at the end of the episode?
I didn't.
Not essential, but the one thing that I did glean from that is that the showrunner and the writer for that episode, his name is Ryan J. Condal. He points out that these festivities, jousting, dueling in this controlled setting, is like playing at war.
Yes.
And I think that has some bearing on like the plot and what's actually happening here. But I also just think it's a really smart way for them to be like, well, there's not a war happening in the show, so how do we get some awesome action sequences into the pilot? Oh, I know. We will throw a festival.
Yes, I do agree with that, but I also want to touch back a little bit with that symbolism of what is to come. I think there's a lot of truth to that because especially, I don't know if you recall, but there was two guys that were going at it, and eventually one of them like had an axe and was like just bashing a guy's head in, like completely collapsing it. And all the crowd were cheering and screaming, and everybody in the king's booth, like they almost looked bored. Like they were watching like, oh yes, that lovely. Like, and again, like it's that sense.
Peacetime royalty.
It's the peacetime royalty, but I also feel like it's foreshadowing something to come and how nobles view war in general, because the lords view war very different from how the peasants view war. The people that are going to be going to war versus the people that are commanding and benefiting from the war. So I very much saw that. I also think that it's very important to bring up that we meet a particularly important character during this.
Mr. Cole.
Mr. Cole!
Yes.
Sir Kristin Cole. And they very much did try to build up that it was like, obviously it's going to go into more detail, but we're getting a rags to riches sort of situation. Sir Kristin Cole, he came from nowhere. He's Dornish, which they viewed as almost scandalous.
To me, he kind of reads like an Olympian. Like somebody who's just like so dedicated that he's like, I'm going to be so undeniably good at fighting and just like throw myself into this that they like, I'm going to be the best and the royalty are going to like not be able to ignore me.
And again, going to the set design, like if you look at his armor, like really look at it, you can tell it's dented. You can tell it's dirty. It's not polished, like really trying to show you he doesn't have the servants to clean it. He doesn't have like people helping him out. It's him. This is all him. He doesn't have people that are training him. He is, as you're saying, using the Olympian comparison, he is trying to be the very best, like no one ever was. And
Criston Cole!
Gotta catch him to the...
Too far.
Okay. But yes, they very much are trying to portray him as this figure who is the best at what he does. Like he was able to beat Daemon. He was able to de-horse or unhorse everybody that he went up against, including Daemon. Like he was able to unhorse him, and then he was able to beat him in hand-to-hand combat and was named the victor of the Heirs tourney.
So the whole presentation of all of this stuff is just excellent. The aerials that they do throughout, really solid sound design. And there's one shot in that fight that I wanted to highlight where when they're jousting, so Cole versus Daemon.
Yes.
And then he like knocks him over and he like slides along the rail.
Yes.
And like falls off on the other side. That's a stunt, dude. That and with the sound of it, I've just really, really loved how they did that. And just the viscerality.
That was Daemon who
those.
fell off, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because that's why he was so angry. And I presume that he's the one that took it to the swords.
Yes, he did call for swords. Okay. For whatever reason, I was misremembering. But before we get too far ahead into that, I also, again, I alluded to it earlier.
You keep talking. I'm just going to check the camera real quick here.
Something I alluded to earlier, especially when there was the killing, the blood, and the violence going on, you were getting those cuts, some really good cuts to the queen in the birthing room. Like you were getting that sense again, calling back that a woman's battle
Yes.
is in the birthing room. Or again,
Excellent.
I should probably look into what that, but they were very much trying to show that, showing the struggles of that. And
the intercutting that you're talking about.
Yes.
It's smart. It underlines it. It's like poetry. It rhymes.
yes. And I also do think it's worth noting that, and again, I know that the Hand of the King is there to handle all the issues that are going on in the kingdom, so the king doesn't have to worry about it. But I did, for whatever, like, I calmed down. Like when I first watched it, I was a lot more riled up, but it probably was because I knew what was going to be happening later. But I was really riled up by seeing how the Maester came and told the king, told Otto, rather than telling the king, that things were not going well in the birthing room. Because like that was,
I didn't catch that. That's interesting.
the Maester comes and tells Otto, and obviously you can't hear it, but you know that he's saying things are not going well. Like,
And that really shows that Otto's the one who wears the pants in this kingdom.
so yes, but
At least in the mind of the small council.
I will give Otto the benefit in this sense of like this. Those are the sort of things that the Hand of the King does. Like people come and tell him the issues and he'll determine what's good.
Fair.
However, I do think if it's coming concerning the queen, you'd think that the Maester would be like, hey, your wife's not doing so well. So that was something that really stuck out to me, is that the Maester comes and is like, hey, something's going on here, that like the king might be aware. And Otto does tell the king right away, and the king goes and joins his wife up in the room where the pregnancy continues to go poorly.
The birthing, yes.
The birthing continues to. The
Which-
pregnancy was going poorly, but
This is, I mean, it's a brutal episode. This is the most devastating aspect to it, I think. And the way that so I want to get your read on this.
Yes.
Because I got a little extra information on it. My initial watch, it wasn't necessarily clear to me if there was a way the queen could have survived or not.
So when I watched it, it was either going to be that the king, they both die, or the baby dies. That was very clear to me.
Yes. Okay. So because that's the thing, because that's the way that the Maester presents it.
Yes.
But to me, a little bit, I was like, maybe the Maester just understands the critical nature of like producing an heir, and like is like time is of the essence. But that also kind of colored my reading of Viserys in a different way, because he then does consent to, okay, we're gonna have to cut her open, try and save the child. But it is, as you say, the again, the showrunner confirmed it, that the queen is going to die no matter what. But this still is a choice.
This is
for
still a
Viserys.
choice. And I will also point out that I did take note that even like, again, I've never been in a situation like that, but you don't get this. And it could be that he's just in shock, but I feel like he's communicating a little too coherently. Sorry. He's communicating a little too coherently to be like, to be in shock. He's like, hey, it's going to be all right. Like, I love you. But you don't get the sense that he's like devastated until both the mother and the son are dead. And to me, especially where you see how much the death of the queen affects him later on in the show, it just is really disheartening to me, where, again, I think it ties into, this was the one aspect of being king that he was fully committed to fulfilling. And just like everything else that he does as king, he fucks it up.
Buddy, dude, just get a better wife. Come on.
And
that's a joke. Yeah, and I do think that they handle the portrayal of this pretty delicately. I think you get exactly as much of it as you need to really get the horror of the situation without it becoming indulgent, like overly so, like grotesque.
Yes. And again, not to shit on Viserys too much, like when they first floated the idea, he was horrified. Like he he did.
Yeah.
He did have the initial reaction. We're like, no, like we can't even consider this. But then I think he did realize.
But then 15 seconds later, he's like, I am the king. Ah, well.
Yes.
What must be done must be done.
He doesn't have the really the joy to be able to make these sort of decisions. Like in his head, he has to be like, I have to pick the kingdom over my own personal.
Yeah.
Which, again, I feel like that's been Viserys character. This will be Viserys's like underlining.
Excuse me.
Oh, you're good.
So all that happens.
Well, yeah, while this is going on, Criston and Daemon are duking it out in like and I think it also there is some level of foreshadowing is Daemon should have won, like at least the melee portion. Like he had beaten Sir Kristin Cole, but he didn't finish the job. He didn't get Criston to yield. He started showboating and then Sir Kristin Cole came with the chair.
Good fight.
Yeah, good fight.
But again, I appreciate that they have so much at play already within the violence. It's not just violence for violence's sake. It's revealing character dynamics and deeper motivation and character flaws.
I also do want to point this out again. I don't know why I was picking up on this. So like, I'll fully admit, I love Daemon as a character. Daemon is probably, he's tied up there with Corlys.
Is he top one?
No, because he's tied with Corlys.
Okay.
Like he is one of my favorite characters. And I feel though, like when he comes in, that was the loudest the crowd had cheered for anybody. That like they didn't even cheer as loud when they were calling this the Heirs name day. When he came riding in, the common, like he's clearly the common folk there seemed to love him. Again, I haven't read the books. I don't know what the belief or the opinion of Daemon is, especially since I get the sense that there might be a lot of people who hate him since he did do everything with the gold cloaks. But at the event in particular, he seemed to be the fan favorite. He seemed to be the LeBron James.
I felt that.
Like nobody like, and he felt like he could do anything. Like I really do love the fact that he like it's such a dick move, but he went and got Alicent's favor right after. Like,
that's him again. Character dynamics, like that's his play is that he bests her brother, and then goes asks her favor. All the while, I'm sure the Otto's over like this motherfucker.
Like somebody just get him off that horse. No, he's a
and then sorry, you go.
No, I mean he's a complicated character, but I also feel like he's very much a loved character, not only by the viewers but by the people in general. Like the Targaryens are clearly the family in power, and people love the Targaryens.
It's a happy time.
It's a happy time.
As far as you can have in Westeros.
It's a peaceful time. And Daemon's the dashing young brother who's the king's, like he was always
So Criston wins the tournament.
Yes.
And then asks Rhaenyra's favor.
Yes.
Which, I mean, that kind of feels like the default. Like if you win the tournament, then you would probably go and ask the princess's favor. But also, maybe that'll lead to something.
I don't know about that.
I don't know if we need to dig into it anymore right now.
I don't think.
But it does just sort of play into, if there was any choice there, this is a man on a mission.
Yes.
Like he is trying to get into the best position that a commoner such as himself can ascend to.
And I also do think it's worth noting by the end of this time, the queen is dead, I believe. The queen has died by the time, because
Cue the Smiths.
Well, by the time at the very end, people were coming in and like whispering in everybody else's ear that were in the booth, and all the other lords started getting up immediately and taking off. So something is clearly going on and happening. And it goes into the funeral for the prince and for the queen.
And this is one scene where you get that complicated nature in Daemon.
Yes.
It's kind of a tender moment.
It's a very tender moment, and where you can truly, because yes, you get the whole incestuous flirtation from Daemon.
Not yet.
Well, there was some flirtation in that scene in the
It's not
throne
over the edge yet.
It's not over the edge.
But knowing where it goes. Sorry, we said we were going to be good about spoilers.
What? Something comes out of that relationship?
Maybe.
But no, like, you could very much tell there's a flirtatious, like, if you were having that relationship with an uncle or aunt, there would be concerns.
Okay.
But it's not over the top in that, as far as Targaryens go, in that opening scene.
Yeah, Targaryen standards, right?
Right. It was very mild by Targaryen standards. But you're right. You get that very tender moment, especially where Rhaenyra blames her father completely. And, I'd say rightfully so, with how much he was pressuring. Like, he knew that they had had the stillborns. They had had issues with pregnancies, and he yet still insisted on his wife trying to have a son and heir. So I feel like there's a lot of justification that Rhaenyra can have towards resenting her father.
I'll just say that the silence in that scene is loaded.
Yes.
Really well done, and how they kind of take a beat before she issues the Dracarys.
Yes.
To have that, which again, Viking funeral, all that bit on the hilltop looks amazing. What they did there.
Also point out at 45:14 is when we get our second dragon appearance. That is still our only dragon we've seen in the show at this point. Syrax.
That's what we're going with.
Don't at me.
Did the job. Got the burn going.
Yes. And on the flip side, you can see
did we say that the baby died?
The baby's dead.
Yeah.
There's a dead baby here.
I mean, that'll become clear in that.
Yes.
Am I jumping ahead?
No. Well, I do want to highlight that I said that people were it was Hightower that was telling everybody in the booths when they were all getting up.
Oh, okay.
I think it is worth pointing out that Otto was the one letting everybody else know in the royal booth. Like, obviously we can't hear what he's saying, but we can assume that he's telling everybody else, the queen is dead, the heir is dead, shit's going down. Like,
I don't know if we need to read into that, because, like, who else would?
Well, he wasn't in the room. He didn't know what was going on.
Oh, okay.
So he knew, because Otto never was in the birthing room at all, but he's the one who's telling everybody what's going on.
So is this just a demonstration of the dude has a network?
The dude has it. Well, I mean, we know later on he does have a network. He knows what's going on. And again, I want to get into this. Like, well, first of all, the Maesters come from Old Town. Otto is from Old Town. Like, the Hightowers are the lords of Old Town.
Okay, I'm with you.
Again, we'll get into this more, and I'm happy to break this down as it becomes more relevant. But there is a conspiracy that the Maesters throughout history have reported to the Hightowers. They don't report to the kings. They report to the Hightower family. So you get, again, like, tinfoil hat, Valyrian steel hat over here.
Valyrian foil.
Valyrian foil. It's very much believed that all the Maesters work for Hightower rather than working for the realm or working for the king. So that again,
it could be something there. It does follow along those lines. Again, that's sort of reading between the lines.
It's reading between the lines. It's a conspiracy. I know it's an internet conspiracy. I know I'm not the first. I'm not even the person who came up with it, but I definitely see it. I also am a big believer in it. But I'll just leave that there. But the king is visibly broken. We see the king visibly broken at the funeral. I think he's let the king facade fall. Like, yes, he's devastated that he failed as a king and lost the heir. But I think it's really hitting him in a human sense that he lost the love of his life. He lost his queen and he lost his son. He's very much a broken man, and doesn't necessarily know what to do. Because,
what's he say? My family is destroyed.
Yes, his family is destroyed, which that does. I also do want to point this out as well. That's something, again, there's a lot of
This
hate.
dude has notes, everybody. To the listener, I thought I had a lot of notes here. But Mr. Bryce has come to the table prepared. Go on.
Otto wasn't like, I need to go back and see. I won't say that he wasn't there at the funeral, but I did not visibly see him. He wasn't readily available. He wasn't readily available and seen at the funeral. Now, again, if he's not there, there's very much an argument you can be made that he's the hand of the king. He's filling in for the king while the funeral is taking place. But I also do think it's worth noting that if he isn't there, that is sort of a big deal that he's.
Well, wouldn't that just seems like it was probably agreed upon, because surely that would lose him if he had the option to attend the funeral. That would be such a hit in his favor. Like, he would lose so much respect from the king in that. So I'm not sure that one has too much bearing.
I'm not saying it as it's a visual.
But like, as far as like the storytelling goes, I'm with you to where it's like the fact that he's not in attendance, or at least not represented as in attendance.
Yes,
it speaks volumes.
It's the visual of him not being there.
Yes.
It's not the story of him not being there.
Yeah.
Like, I think it is worth pointing out, because he very well could have been there, and he wasn't readily available to be seen.
We don't get his reaction.
No, like it's very much.
It's probably not really registering to him, because it's a game,
or it's overly registering to him where he sees an opportunity.
Which may explain why he immediately calls another small council meeting to discuss the issue of the king's heir.
Small council meeting number 3, where he is pushing the line of succession. That, like, he's not letting that go away. Throughout the entire meeting, he is like, we need to decide this. We need to decide this.
He's being an ass about it.
Like, he's not giving anyone a chance to mourn. And again, we get to see how some of these relationships within the small council are. Corlys Valerian is on Team Daemon. He was like, just name Daemon again, which I think is worth noting. Again, Daemon has respect, not just of the people that he follows, but of highly respectable people within the council. Like,
noted.
Corlys, in my opinion, having Corlys's respect in the small council is the most important person to have respect for.
He has the black vote.
He has the black vote.
Not a political podcast.
He has the black vote. No, but everybody else is a bootlicker. Corlys is clearly not a bootlicker in the show. He is over there. He's like, I will agree where I know it needs to be agreed. While as much as I love my boy Lionel, he's sort of a bootlicker in this first episode. Like,
yes, and he makes more moves. Oh, not spoiling it. Never mind. But this first episode, absolutely.
And I mean, you don't even really get the details of the other council members. Like, they're
secondary, tertiary players.
Yes,
and they're set up as such from the go here.
But they're set up as such, and they're also set up to be yes men for the king. Like, they just agree with what the king or with what Otto says. While Corlys is over here is like, it makes sense. Name Daemon as heir.
Can I just say something?
Yes.
I love their little spheres that they have.
Yes.
That speaks to me. And they're all different colors.
Yes.
And there's no actual function. Like, I don't know if in the book or in some greater mythology, I could like imagine like they put it in and like it glows and like they all come together and make a rainbow or something. But just the tactile element there just lights up something inside me. I really love it.
I love it too, because especially it gives a sense of like, this is my seat, and like I don't know if
it's like unlocking your seat.
Like, you get a say now. Like, your voices now can be heard. I don't know if it's in the books that are specifically about with the House of the Dragon. It's not in A Song of Ice and Fire, but it could be there.
That's an annoying little thing to carry around, though. You just each one of them has like a little bocce ball.
What else are they carrying around there? These are guys that have bankers paying for them for everything. They
just have a cart that they can pay to be brought around with them. Coconuts, yeah.
I do get the sense, even though I know that I did find it interesting that Otto was pushing for Rhaenyra to be named the successor. But here's the thing. I can't decide where that's coming from. Is he trying to push that wedge between the king and Daemon, or like, what is your thoughts on when that was going on? Because I still don't really know the best way to...
I mean, that's as good a theory as I can think of.
Like, because I really don't know. Like, I can't really see anything else coming from it, especially from the sense that Otto has always been portrayed in this episode as somebody who's trying to move up in the world. And even Daemon says...
But he's playing the long game.
He's playing the long game, but I don't see how the long game benefits him by naming Rhaenyra the heir to the throne versus naming Daemon the heir to the throne. Because if Daemon...
Well, I mean, they've already established that they don't see eye to eye.
Of course.
So it could just be something so as simple as like, I don't like him. I don't want him. I don't want him anywhere near the throne. He's disrespected me 3 times today.
Yes.
I mean, who do you think that the king should name as heir? Just like, yeah. I mean, you're not even living in this world.
If I was the king, I honestly would have picked Daemon. Again, Rhaenyra is the obvious choice. Like, I love Rhaenyra and I want, no spoilers, I'm team Rhaenyra. But in that sort of situation, especially where he's established himself, he's about tradition. He was named to the throne due to tradition. And maybe he's changing his mind based on his experience, but based on all that, you'd think if he's so focused on the legacy of House Targaryen and the legacy of following his forefathers, he would have picked Daemon. But again, I'm not mad about it.
Unbiased, just being cold and calculating, okay, what is going to keep the peace and maintain tradition? I mean, to me, it's and they talk about it in the episode. There are only really 3 options. You have Rhaenyra, Daemon, and Rhaenyra.
The thing is, and that's something I do want to point out. She still has support. She still has people that are in saying that Rhaenys is can be named the successor.
Yeah, and it's to me, if he just wants to avoid war, Daemon should be number 1.
Yes.
Rhaenys should be number 2, and Rhaenyra should be number 3. And it really is just the same thing that I'm sure. Who's the king at the very beginning in the prologue?
Jaehaerys.
Jaehaerys. Yes. And I'm sure it's just the same thing he's saying. It is people are going to be more okay with a dude. Yeah. It's what we're used to. Don't stir the pot. That. It's just practical. But I think that I think that it's just he's such a complicated guy. And
yes.
We've had enough of a taste for it that Viserys, being in the world, actually living in it, understands, no, that could be disastrous.
Yes.
I still think that would. I kind of know where it goes, but I think that probably would have been the best pick.
And I think it is also worth pointing out, the Targaryens have only been in power for 100 years. Again, 100 years is still a long time, but in the sense of empires and all the other countries, that's relatively not that long, especially where the 7 kingdoms were 7 kingdoms that were always at war with each other prior to this. And the Targaryens are able to come in and bind the kingdoms together. Yes, because of dragons. That's the only reason.
They say as much.
Yes.
And that's the thing. I love how they kind of like set it up because Viserys is talking to Rhaenyra.
Yeah.
They're down with the candles around Balerion's skull, the big boy.
The big boy.
And he's like, why is our family special? And she's just like, dragons. And he's like, exactly.
That's literally all we
That's
got.
all there is to it. There is nothing special about us besides that we have dragons.
And our hair is fabulous.
See, that's big too. Actually, to have a visual signifier, I'm sure has served them very well. But yes, and dragons. That's all it is.
And another side note, I was really hoping that they were going to do this in the show, but Targaryens have like violet eyes. Like, and that's
they didn't set it up in the first one. In Game of Thrones, it's too late.
I know, but it's just so good. It's so good. Like
I'm with you too. I think it's too late now that we're into one season, but I would have appreciated that choice, and I do appreciate that from the jump, this first episode way more colorful.
Yes.
Than the whole of Game of Thrones. And it's like we're still dealing with some heavy shit.
Yes.
Like there's room for that, but the look of this world that they're portraying, and maybe it's like, oh, this is like more of a peacetime. Maybe it's a deliberate choice that's going to sort of go away as the series progresses.
Yes.
But that I do think that just plays a big part in that this show looks better than Game of Thrones.
Well,
they're willing to do more with color.
As much as I love a Game of Thrones and the first few seasons of Game of Thrones, there's a lot of people who do talk about how the pilot had there was a lot of issues with the pilot. I know they had to reshoot a lot of the pilot because they had characters switch out, but there was a lot of issues, and it is definitely clunky. As much as I love love a Game of Thrones, and it like.
See, and that's where this episode is just an overwhelming success to me, and indeed the first season, in that it's not just that we have the budget, we can pay more CGI artists and, better cinematography, better sets and all that. Like, it is succeeding on all fronts. Like, the reason that the first season of Game of Thrones was such a success is because great story, great characters.
Yes.
And that's really all the first season of Game of Thrones was made for $50 to $60 million. That's the reported budget.
A light sum.
So presumably less than the first 3 episodes of this show. But the reason that it succeeded is because they got those fundamentals.
Yes.
So again, I've sort of already made this point, but that they're going into this show and not resting on their laurels, but building on that. They're taking what was already working in the first season of the first show, and now they have the money to play.
Yes. One thing I want to just quickly touch on, and it's something we can dive into more, but you can see Otto is making moves with how he came up to his daughter and said, "Hey, go comfort the king.
Yes.
Wear one of your mother's dresses." And then
that's where he steps over the line, and it's like, oh, you're clearly making a move here.
Yes. You could be like, is he making a move? Like, is
that wear one of your mother's dresses? Okay.
And you're like,
yep.
Yeah, we know where this is going.
He's planting a seed.
But I have to say, he told her to wear one of her mother's dresses and to be there. I actually feel like, and again, the age difference is weird, but I feel like Alicent coming over to the king and just like that moment where she was like, when my mother died, everybody spoke in riddles, but I just wanted somebody to say that they were sorry. Like I going like, especially where I know where this character is going to be going and how certain feelings I will have about this is a very tender, it's
genuine, and that's why it works, because Otto is making a play that she is not privy to. Yes. She is genuinely going to comfort the king, and as it just so happens, pretty good at it.
Yeah, she very much listens to her father, and
she respects his models.
That's all the man wanted. That's when he fell. That's when he fell for her right away.
And for all that we've said, all the moves that this show has made right, that they're like canonizing and giving that just check of approval to miniature model making and collecting. Absolutely genius. They're going to sell so many damn toys.
Ladies, if you want a little piece of advice, if you want a guy, you got to compliment his miniatures. That's how you end up with the man, is just compliment his miniatures. That's how you get him.
I'm not going to chase down that innuendo.
Well, that also does lead into arguably one of the most impactful, like not impactful as but what comes out of it with Daemon in the brothel. But I have some very like conflicting feelings, and I'd be very interested in hearing what.
Do we see him say it?
No, we don't hear him say it. And he looks quite devastated. Like, he doesn't look happy, does not look like he's in a good mood when he's there. Like, clearly his lieutenant is there and his lieutenant's having a grand old time. And his lieutenant's like trying to get him to give a speech and everything. But Daemon, the entire time, he looks upset. He looks distracted. He doesn't look like he's...
Yeah, indeed. And that's what he says to Viserys when he confronts him about it. We grieve in different ways. I think that is interesting that they don't show him say it. But I also think that gives us more of Viserys' perspective on it. Which is like, it's safe to assume for the context clues that we have that it was probably more of a, oh, I guess I'll make a toast and a little joke here. But by not showing that, we naturally kind of side with Viserys more,
yes.
Which is probably the smart move in that, like, he's the one in tremendous grief who indeed his family has just been destroyed.
Yes.
But it's just an interesting choice.
Yes, it very much seems like, because when I first was watching through, I'm like, oh, is Otto like making up lies and is just going with it? But I don't think it, like, it's clearly not a lie. Otherwise, Daemon would have challenged Otto to a duel.
Yeah.
Like, if it was a lie. But I do get the sense that how he portrayed it, or may have done a toast about it, like he could have even been like he could have been drunk and been like, here's to the heir for a day, like trying to be like
yeah, just different tone of voice. It doesn't sound so bad, which is like a classic method of like conflict production between two characters, and these things is like, one experiences a thing when you like read it on paper, it sounds one way, but
yes,
it's because the other character wasn't there.
And again, I don't want it to sound like that I'm trying to stick in Daemon's corner too much, because I know that I really enjoy Daemon as a character, but just complicated. But just all the evidence surrounding it just, something isn't adding up to the sense, because I don't see him going like with the Two-Face situation where he's literally like, he looks devastated at the table, to going around like, ha, I'm the heir now.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, I get why Viserys, like even the sense of him saying it, and especially with how Otto was portraying it, I get why Viserys was upset. And I get why he decided to revoke him being named heir. And
so you think that's because that scene happens before he talks to Rhaenyra?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. See, that's clicking into place for me more. That I'm sure that's what pushed him over the edge.
Yes, this was the final decision. Like, because again, I know we touched on it, but in the third small council meeting, it ended because he pretty much had a breakdown and said, my family is destroyed. Like, you guys are picking at me like I'm a
vultures. I think he said,
yes. Like you guys are picking at me like vultures. And Otto was like, let's put a put in this. We'll circle back.
Yeah.
And this was definitely the nail on the coffin for Daemon being named heir, and Daemon was commanded to go back to Runestone, which is where his wife is. And we all know how much he loves his wife.
Yes, he makes the comment earlier, demonstrating great dissatisfaction with his wife, which does irk Otto again. Again, just another instance of a growing divide
and again,
or conflict between them.
Exactly.
Viserys meets with Rhaenyra. He's it's dragons, and then he talks about the Song of Ice and Fire and tells her that it is important for her to know because she is going to be the next queen.
Which, real quick, 57:28 is when we see Balerion's head. I know he's not alive, but I can't wait to see Balerion on screen and alive, because
we'll come back here in 12 years.
Because he's gonna make Drogon look like a kitten. Like, he is legitimate, like he is a creature of death. And for me, like, I think this is worth giving, again, not to get off topic too much, giving Viserys a little bit of credit. Balerion is considered to be the greatest dragon that the Targaryens have ever had. Number one. And Viserys was the last rider of Balerion. So I know
him.
Yeah, he was the last.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that's a fascinating bit of lore.
Yes,
because he's just so, like, not quite nebbish, but like he doesn't have that, like, ambition, like that like red hot passion that you would expect from a rider of the greatest dragon to ever live.
Not only that, but he was riding him when he was the largest he would ever get. Like, it was peak Balerion, because dragons don't stop growing.
The biggest big boy.
The biggest of the big boys.
So, okay, does that mean that he was riding him when he died, or did he die, like, of old age? Can the dragons die of old age?
I don't want to read any of the books. I don't know how he died. I assume that he did, like, that something happened there. But
I'm sure there's a story.
I'm sure,
because that would be the greatest dragon to ever live can't die of old age, and at the very least, it would have to be like some grand self-sacrifice, or like his death created some like mystical magical artifact or something. But we don't know.
And it very well could have been like, oh, he's too big to even ride now. So, like, do we just put him down?
Well, that's a to-do.
Like, who wants to do that? But I really do like this scene, because something that I noted is I feel like this is the first time Rhaenyra sees that her father actually does love her, because when she was going into that, you could clearly see that she was upset. She didn't feel respected. She still clearly hates her father. And her father comes in and names her heir. And I think that's when it clicked that, oh, he does love me.
This dude's under pressure.
Well, not only is he under pressure, but he's going to go against 100 years of Targaryen tradition for me. And
indeed.
And you can see her emotions toward her father shift on the face. Like, there's very much the mask of anger and dislike, but it goes to shock, and it just really lays out the rest of the show on how she feels towards her father. And I think it's
a good moment. It's what you say. It's a key turning point.
Yes. I also, again, it's something that's alluding to later in the show. I do appreciate, especially where when it comes to dragons, I feel like he's probably the most knowledgeable with dragons, because he's the one who rode Balerion, which I feel like gives him the insight where he's saying, hey, it's an illusion that we control dragons. Like, as the rider of Balerion, the Black Dread, I'm sure he knows better than anybody that
I guess he would.
we don't control these beasts. They listen to us but they don't obey us. And I also appeal, like, because he apologizes to her as well. Like, he apologizes to her, and he, like, it's not just him naming her heir. And I think that that's what is very significant, because kings don't have to apologize. Like, that's one of the benefit of being a king. You don't have to apologize to anybody. Like, everybody has to apologize to you. So the fact that he was doing that and named her heir, like, I think, again, like, it's that turning point for Rhaenyra. And
so this leads to the grand ceremony.
Where everybody is swearing fealty. And
fealty.
And
fealty.
They swear their fealty at Maverick for their rewards points that they're going to get.
I see. Yeah, but they all bend the knee, as it were.
Yes. And I also do think it's worth noting everybody who does swear to the queen, essentially, to who's going to be in waiting, because it could play later on who decides not to obey this oath that they particularly make.
In season 1, episode 1. I mean, come on, dude. It doesn't get bigger than that.
I also want to point out,
there is one person not in attendance at this meeting. He is flying away.
At 61:28, we get our second dragon, but our first sighting of Caraxes, I believe, is how we'll go with it. And it's Daemon with his dragon. And I also think it's worth noting the level of mastery that he has with his dragon. Like, there's no fear, there's no hesitation. Like, when he brings his mistress with him, she, like, obviously everyone's going to be a little hesitant, but, like, he grabs her and, like, forces her hand onto the dragon. And like, Caraxes doesn't react in any way. And if you remember in a Game of Thrones, like, even though we know Jon was, Daenerys was, like, really hesitant when Jon was going to go touch Drogon.
Indeed.
And, like, so there clearly is, like, an attitude of, like, okay.
Well, there is also that element of just, like, this is a whore. And, like, if she loses an arm, like, I can buy it. But you still have a point.
Like, the point that I'm making is he clearly has a level of understanding or mastery of his dragon, and
they have a special bond.
And especially, like, I'm sure growing up seeing his brother be the rider of Balerion the Black Dread, that he has that idea of wanting to be his own level of mastery of a dragon. But I have more thoughts about Caraxes.
We'll do our dragon breakdown here in just a second. I do just want to underline, because we've been talking about fits, that Rhaenyra's fit at the ceremony is unbelievable. This is the same that was used in a lot of the promotional material.
Yes.
Very wise choice, I have to say. The black, the gold, the red.
The Targaryen colors.
Fire.
Fire and blood. No, I can't, if I could literally just talk about the costumes and the getup the entire time that we've done this. Like,
that could be the podcast.
That could be the podcast.
We are a Dragon TV show drip podcast.
Like, I would wear every single outfit.
I love her crown that she has to go with it, and the black kind of gives it, like, and I don't know if there's too much deeper into this, but almost like more of like a funeral ceremony, like following the death of her brother and mother, which I assume that some time has transpired for people to RSVP and then later make on out to attend this very important ceremony. But in our experience for the episode, I can't help but notice that beyond just it looks really cool.
But even with that being, like, yes, you're right. But even if it had been a year after the fact, it's still, she's being named heir because her brother died. Like,
yes.
So, like, there is a level of, I'm paying homage to the dead. I'm paying, like, I'm showing my respect.
And even if you wanted to just, like, make it even more simple, it's just like dark undertones to this whole affair.
Yes. And also red and black are the colors of House Targaryen. But we can also go...
It worked out.
It worked out. It worked out.
Final thoughts on the episode?
Final thoughts. I'm just going to reiterate, probably one of the best pilots that I've seen. Like, there's very few pilots that it might be blasphemous. I'd say it's on par of Breaking Bad's pilot. I know that...
Good one.
I know Breaking Bad is unique in the sense that it was the first of its world to come out, while House of the Dragon had the backboard to jump off Game of Thrones. But still, quite impressive that they were able to do everything that they did. And something else I talked about quite a bit, the music. Like, I'm a sucker for fantasy music. I'm a sucker for music in general. The music was incredible. They were obviously taking stuff from the Game of Thrones.
It's a good mix.
And they were changing it up, but they were coming in with their new stuff. It was incredible.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. I think that this is a stellar pilot. Just really as good as it gets. And it's a difficult tee-up.
Yes.
That they just knocked out of the park. And that it's like, okay, we're following up one of the most successful, one of the biggest, one of the most popular series of all time. We have a lot, and I mean a lot of money at play here. And I think in every level, from visuals, characters, smart storytelling, they nailed it. I really have no notes.
And I also do want to point out, like I mentioned at the beginning, I had no expectation of just how poorly I felt the last season of A Game of Thrones went. And I'm sure I wasn't the only person. I know for a fact I wasn't the only person that was like, no, I got burned on this. I'll watch this show, but it's not like gonna be.
And that's an interesting thing to think is if Game of Thrones season 8 hadn't been such a disappointment and like such a overwhelming disappointment, like blatant, like social media hate all across the board, people were not happy. If that was not the case, does it not light a fire under their asses making this show? Is this the payoff of that? We'll never know, but it's interesting to think about.
It is, but I always think back on the Jonah Hill quote that the goal of Hollywood is to make shit movies that make money. Like, so
yeah, there are some people in it for the art. Thank goodness.
Oh, thank goodness. But do we want to break down the dragons real quick?
Let's do that.
All right. Which one do you want to talk about first? Caraxes or Syrax?
Let's do Syrax. Or, yes, Syrax. Just in order of presentation.
Okay. Well,
what do you got?
So I know I alluded to earlier that I felt like there was a young vibe to this dragon. Well, first of all, it's a gold dragon. I like sort of that design. It has that.
It's their colors.
Yeah.
The two dragons we're talking about, they're Targaryen dragons, the red and the gold. Excellent.
Yes.
So it's going to go with their fits.
And
yes.
Syrax is clearly the dragon of Rhaenyra, who is the main character of the show.
It's also a female dragon.
It is a female.
I don't know if you knew that.
I did not know that. I never knew if there were genders to
No. Well, it's not explicitly stated. This is the one piece of lore that I know that was not, at least I don't think was explicitly stated in the show. But it is a female dragon, and that's Daemon's dragon is male.
Okay.
And I wonder if that's going to be sort of the precedent as we go into the show. Then again, there aren't a ton of female dragon riders, but we'll see.
Well, something that is, never. I'm dumb. I realize. Yeah, there's gender to the.
They certainly use the pronouns.
Yes.
Yeah.
But when you're hearing the dragon, when it does its growls, when it does the noises, it sounds young. Like, I don't know, like it's a higher pitch. It's very much like.
Well, it could be both, because I think you're right. It surely is a young dragon, because don't they usually hatch the dragon with what's going to be its rider?
Yes, but
as a child, I mean.
Mm-hmm. And again, this might be me just looking into the show too much, but when you look in, like when you when there was the shots of the dragons when it was like showing like just the neck and the face, you can see the eyes. And even though it's a very powerful creature, it's trying to show that it is a powerful creature. It's a majestic creature. There wasn't any malice or anything in the eyes. It very much was, I don't want to say docile, but it was.
It's as doe-eyed as a dragon it can get in this show.
Exactly, which to me that gives a sense of like a young dragon who hasn't born into that level of veracity, as well as, and again, maybe that's just me coming from a family of chubby cheeks, but it looked like it was a chubby cheek dragon.
That dragon energy.
It was giving that big dragon energy. But especially compared to Caraxes, it's a thicker dragon.
Oh my goodness, I just realized that our camera stopped recording. I'm going to change the battery on that, but you can keep talking.
Oh no. It sounded young with the noise that it was making. However, I do also think it's worth pointing out that if we look at the size comparison between Syraxes and Drogon at this point, like Drogon was... See, I'm pretty sure that Syrax...
So you mean at like the same point in time?
Yeah, like Drogon clearly is like... much larger.
Well, he's a big boy in his own right. He's no Balerion.
No,
but he's the big one.
He's the big one, but like,
what's the opposite of the run to the liver?
He's the alpha. But a lot of my opinions on telling the difference between a young dragon and the adult dragon actually come from Correct. Well, what are your thoughts on? I don't want to take up much. I
mean, I don't feel like we get. Well, clearly you've gleaned a great deal, but from my experience, we don't get quite enough time with the creature to like really break down much. But I love the design. It's more your classic Game of Thrones wyvern. Because indeed, these are wyverns.
Yes,
they have the wings attached to the arms, making them a wyvern. This is a dragon podcast. I'm going to be a stickler about this. Wyverns are still dragons, but it's just worth pointing out.
Yes.
But yeah, that's that classic Game of Thrones, Westeros style dragon. There aren't like a lot of flourishes. Definitely some personality to it. Again, you say with the eyes, but you also have some real size that's shown off in that funeral scene.
Yes.
It's like you're talking that this is like a young, like lower pitched dragon. This is still a Game of Thrones dragon.
It's still
9 years old or older, around that age. Like, you do not want to mess with this thing.
Yes.
Like it is not a peewee.
No. And I'm not definitely taken away from the fact that it is literally a killing machine that is just death on wings. But compared to the red worm, compared to the big red boy,
the bloodworm, as it were,
the bloodworm,
which yes. I'm gonna keep on this train. Not technically a worm. That's a type of dragon, which I believe that's the type of dragon that has no appendages, is basically just a giant snake. This is not what Caraxes is, but I do feel there is some justification in labeling this wyvern as a worm, in that it is very long, extended. The neck is longer, along with the tail and body, than we've typically seen with the Game of Thrones dragons, which is a cool departure.
Yes. And I also do love the coloring of Caraxes, just the red, but with the black undertones that it goes, like, it really has that, it almost like what a red dragon in Dungeons and Dragons. I feel like the coloring of Caraxes is what a red dragon would be.
This dragon, and we don't get as much time with this even as we did with Syrax.
Yes.
But this dragon reads more wicked.
Well, that's another, that I did not realize the doe eyes in Syraxes until I saw the eye. You can see the eyes, and it wants blood. Like, there is anger, there is fury, that, like, it is very much a reptilian mind where it's like it would, if it had the choice, it would kill everyone in sight. Like it's clearly a creature of death.
There's also something to the like, again, the worm look of it that just, and we'll see where this goes, but it just gives it the sense that there's more speed to this creature.
Yes.
Like I'm thinking like a snake strike. Like it feels like it is capable of that to a degree that most of the dragons in this show aren't.
And maybe it's just because it is such a uniquely styled dragon, but when it took off, it didn't look like it looked like it was an eel in like taking off. Like
it's kind of doing like the Chinese dragon, like swimming through the air thing.
Yes, and I loved it. Like I very much, like it's not the same thing as we've been getting from the other dragons where it's just take off wings in the sense, but I do think we're going to get eventually in some of these, like later and on in the later seasons, seeing how that works to its advantage and being able
in
to
battle, you mean?
yes, in combat situations. But
I also like its little back wings. Again, wyvern, but this wyvern has wings not only on its front legs, but on its back. It has those two like little mini wings.
The little flippers.
You say it like that and it sounds stupid, but it looks really cool.
It looks really good, and I think it really helps with the like.
Yeah, within the animation, you can kind of see how it's adding some stability.
Yeah,
which I guess like from a practical standpoint, that sort of makes sense that. Like it has that elongated body, it might need some fins back there to like stay on balance.
Yeah. I definitely am excited to see where these dragons are going to be going, especially Caraxes. I love it. Can't like very much the bloodworm. It's the names, like again, just seeing the level of veracity that's in the eyes, like. I don't think it's an accident that you get the doe eyes from Syrax and getting just levels of hatred and seething in Caraxes. But I also do feel like there's a little bit of a reflection of the writer as well into it.
Yeah, which this is, Caraxes is, we've seen some tenderness in Daemon, maybe a little bit more than you might have thought, knowing the character off the bat, but this is certainly a mark against him. If we're doing tallies on like good guy, bad guy, seeing his dragon doesn't necessarily read as like a nice, pleasant, humble man.
And as much as we like, I think we did gloss over the entirety of his gold cloak raid. We see that he is his vision.
Brutal.
Like, not only was he going out and killing, he clearly was enjoying it. He was having fun.
Complicated.
He was using his Valyrian steel, which is considered to be the most deadly weapons that are forged by man. Like they're sharper than every other sword. And he was killing just everyone he could get his sword on. For shits and giggles. Like,
yep.
So clear, like, as much as I'm going to be called a Daemon defender, I will accept that, but I'll also be like, yes, this is very much a brutal man who loves killing.
Don't let him hold the baby.
Don't let him hold the baby. But all in all, I love the design of these dragons. I can't wait to see some more dragons coming up. And any last thoughts on the dragons, Austin?
I think we broke it down.
I think we broke it down. Austin, where can they find us?
Right. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Big Flying Lizards with Bryce Wilson and me, Austin Snyder. You can find us on most social media platforms at Big Liz Pod. That's Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Facebook may be up by the time that we post this. You can follow me on Letterboxd. My name is Austin Snyder again. Anything you want to shout out before we wrap up here, Bryce?
Thanks for joining us on this blazing adventure. And
wait. Oh, I forgot to mention also, we are a brand new podcast as of this posting, which, we're through it. I think this was a great episode. I think this went really well.
Yes.
But I was feeling a little pressure going into this in that it's like, okay, this is the first episode of us talking about a show we're going to be talking about for many episodes. So it is one of those that's like, okay, this is bound to get the most eyes, the most ears,
Yes.
as it were. So there's a little pressure to
Hey,
not look like total fools.
I'm excited to look like a fool. If that.
Oh, me too. But there are degrees to this. But the point is, especially as of this posting, we are a new podcast, and that means that we can really benefit from any engagement that you feel willing to offer. And it varies platform to platform, but rate, thumbs up, leave a comment if you're able.
Yeah.
You can also email us at
BigLizPod.
biglizpod@gmail.com
That you can.
if you want to get in contact with either of us. But again, thank you so much for listening. More episodes on the way.
Share the pod.
That one too. Share it with a friend. Share it with your cool friends.
Share it with your grandma. She'll love our language.
Well, I mean, that's kind of that's the brilliance of us starting on a Game of Thrones show. Is that if you're cool with House of the Dragons, you're gonna be cool with this one.
We're cool guys.
Big flying lizards.
All right. Good night, guys.
Yeah, we haven't figured out how to end these. That's the end of the podcast. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
That's all for this week's Dragon Lore. Takes cold and hot, spread shore to shore. Enjoyed yourself? Please join the squad. Follow on social media at BigLizPod. And one quick reminder before you go, to rate, review, and share the show. Thank you for listening. It means a lot. See you next week, same time, same spot.